Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree. It's time for another entry in the video game buyer's guide. Today we're tackling the companion to the amazing Atari 2600, the not as amazing Atari 5200, the Super System. Um, I'm going to be honest. These buyer's guides are going to be partially what you can expect if you're trying to buy this product, but it's also going to be partially judgmental who in their right mind should be buying this product. And I'm going to label them as, should this only be for collectors, completists, gamers, etc. Um, and so I'm going to try to, rate them based on their overall appeal to who do they appeal to. So the Atari Super System really only appeals to Atari fans, die-hard Atari fans, and completists who have to have everything. Retro gamers who are just in it for the games can skip the 5200 because there are zero original games exclusive to the 5200 you can't get elsewhere on better designed systems with more robust libraries with better designed controllers. However, the die-hard Atari fan, myself included, is going to want a super system, and so I'm going to explain to you what are your options. The completist is going to buy one just to have one, but good luck because, like the Atari VCS, there are multiple models. So if you're a completist, ha ha ha, joke's on you. You got a lot of shit to throw away your money on. But it's okay. Have fun. Not throwing shade, just ribbing you because it's fun. So don't take it the wrong way. So the Atari 5200 Super System was Atari's attempt at a next gen game console. So they did the VCS in, I believe, 76 or 77, and Intellivision came out in 79, I believe. Odyssey 2 came out in either 80 or 81. So the technology was advancing rapidly. And Atari was like, we can't keep up. Let's get a new product on the market. And also, this ET Pac Man, 1983 debacle has kind of put a kibosh on our business. So let's do something different. Although, if you're a nerd and you know the timeline, the Super System came out in 82, a year before the crash. But if you're going to talk about the crash, you have to talk about the Super System because it absolutely contributed to the crash. I would argue more so than ET or Pac Man did, but I've already done that video. Everything you know about the crash is blown out of proportion and misrepresented by what actually happened. Go watch that video. Um, you'll learn something. But let's talk about the 5200, the Super System. The system is technologically speaking comparable to the ColecoVision. So if you buy a ColecoVision and you've played those games, you have an idea of what the Super System can do in terms of graphics and sound and gameplay. It's basically Atari 2600 games with more colors and, you know, a little bit more detail to the sprites, although they're not really sprites yet. So let's be careful the words we use. They're still just pixels. But you have more pixels to color and you have more colors to choose from, so the graphics do look better. You also have more RAM and a better sound chip. Now, the Super System comes in two hardware versions that I'm aware of, and I have to emphasize that I'm aware of. There's the four controller port default base system, and then there's the lesser expensive redesigned two controller port system. Now, despite having four controller ports, none of the games on the console support four-player games. Because even though it had four controller ports, they didn't have the technology to have four players simultaneously. The computer just wasn't smart enough to process that much information at a time. So why were there four controller ports on the system? Nobody fucking knows. Like the Intellivision and other, systems of the time, they did abandon the, uh, single button joystick that the VCS used, and they put out I'm going to say rubbery joystick with a telephone pad, just like everybody else. But the um, The Super System joystick is one of the worst of these joystick telephone pad controllers. Not the worst. That honor goes to Intellivision. Um, but this one's almost as bad. It's at least as bad as the ColecoVision controller, but not quite as bad as the Intellivision controller, which is the biggest abomination in the history of video game controllers. But I digress. Unfortunately, only about, I think, somewhere between 85 and 100 and so games were released for the Super System in its lifetime. Obviously, there may be homebrews out there that I don't know about, um, but it has a very small catalog. And also, unfortunately, um, I would say 90% of that catalog are just ports of games you can get on other systems. And I mean on the Atari. Um, if you already own an Atari, the VCS, and you already own the games that are available on the Super System, are you really going to pay however much money it is for the machine, plus the controller, plus the box, which we're going to talk about in a minute, just to play a better looking version of Berserk when you could get the arcade version of Berserk elsewhere? I don't know. Is it worth it? In 1982, it may have been worth it, but from 1984 on, it was never worth it. But like I said, uh, the Atari VCS has had a lot of flashback consoles and a lot of um, compilations collecting the ROMs. The Super System has not had this, partially because the VCS versions of the arcade games are unique enough that they're their own game, and the Super System versions are basically the arcade version, but not unique enough to be their own game like the VCS version, but also not, you know, faithful enough to the arcade version to be a good substitute to the arcade version when you can get the actual arcade version. So, in terms of games library, the Super System is not worth it. The games are not worth it unless, like I said, you're a lover of Atari, you're a completist, or you grew up with it. Which, if you grew up with it, obviously nostalgia overrides everything. There's nothing I can say to convince you otherwise. I have friends who had a CDI as their home console in their childhood, and they swear by the CDI when the facts of life tell us the CDI is a piece of shit. And it's unfortunate that that's the machine you grow up with because your experiences are obviously tainted and there's nothing I can do about it. All right. As far as modern options, there aren't any. There are 0 retro clones that are compatible with Super System cartridges because nobody cares for the Super System library. Like I said, it's superfluous and there's no reason to support it. There are no modern um, compilations that collect the ROMs of this game system. The exclusives, which are too few to mention, and again, they're not really that notable to begin with, have never been ported or re released in any form. So, as far as modern retro gamers go, the Super System is an oddity at best and most likely not even on their radar. So, you're pretty much limited to buying authentic, original, preferably refurbished hardware because these things break down and you're talking about a 40-year-old piece of electronics. You're going to have to get it repaired at some point, and good luck with that. I mean that legitimately, because parts are getting scarce and people with the knowledge and skill base to repair them are getting scarce. So like I said, good luck. If you happen to get a working 5200 Super System, it comes in 2 flavors. If you have a choice and you don't have a preference, get the 2 controller port system because it uses an actual AC adapter and an RF switch. Avoid the confuddling, confusing, really what the fuck is it for controller port version at all costs. because it uses a hybrid brick that you plug the video cable into, and then that plugs into the TV, but also is the AC adapter that plugs into the wall, and it is wonky and dangerous. And I do not recommend the 4 controller port version of the Super System. Again, unless you're a completist and you just have to own one. But if you're a completist and you own 2 of them, you're going to own the 4 controller port, put it on the shelf as a talking point. You're going to play, if you play your games, the 2 controller port version, because it's the one that's not going to set your house on fire if you play it for more than 30 seconds. So that's the other reason why the Super System immediately got a redesign, because one, it wasn't selling, and it wasn't selling because the ones they were selling they had to recall because it was burning people's houses down. I exaggerate, obviously, don't sue me, but it was a fire hazard nonetheless. And you're giving this fire hazard to children who don't understand it's a fire hazard. This is not smart. I'm surprised the video game crash wasn't caused by lawsuits as the result of houses that burnt down by people who bought this piece of shit. What if you're a retro gamer? You're not a collector. Well, you kind of are. You want to experience the past, but you want to experience the highlights of the past, right? But you're not a completist. You don't have to own literally everything. Should you buy a Super System? And I'm going to say maybe. Hear me out. If you like the Atari games and you want to play arcade games at home, but you don't want to invest in a main setup, but you still want Berserk and, Miss Pac-Man, etc. You want the better, we'll say better graphics, better quality versions of those games, and you either already have an Atari VCS or you're good enough with, like I said, the flashbacks or the compilations. You don't need to experience everything, but you're curious about the Super System. If you're not gonna buy a physical VCS and a library of cartridges, but you're satisfied with the compilations and you're satisfied with the flashbacks or plug and plays, but you want to experience some of those games, then I do recommend the Super System, again, the 2 controller port version, because they actually are better versions of a lot of those games. Again, if you're not going to get the actual arcade versions, they're good enough. But if you also own a ColecoVision, which again, you can get the adapter that lets you play Atari games on it, VCS games, I should say, then you're not going to be impressed with the Super System because their ports of the games are more or less identical to the ColecoVision ports of the same game. And you're going to get more for your money getting a ColecoVision than you will a 5200 because it does have some unique accessories and software titles to it that you can't get on the Super System. So if you're curious about the library, always I say go to the emulate first, download the ROMs, the emulator, try them out for yourself, and decide if they're worth investing the money to get the physical hardware. I would argue that really nobody has any justifiable reason to own a 5200 at this point in time in 2024. It is a relic of the past and it belongs in the past. Like Pet Rock or Chia Pet. Let it go. The past is the past. Let it go.